Florence. Are you ready to continue our chapter? I know I am. I'm not sure. I'm cutting my forehead off, aren't I? Let's do... That's a little bit better. Now you can see my crazy hair. Okay. Aunt Schadenfreude's words came back to her again. You can't help your name. Cook politely suggested that perhaps Inheritance might like to borrow some light armor so she could visit the library before it was locked for the weekend. Their aunt left the table, oblivious to the upset that she had caused. What a load of rot! Cook looked at the three girls glumly considering the tablecloth and started rummaging in a nearby cupboard. Here, I popped to the post office since Suleiman is still out of commission, and I brought something that might cheer you up. Part of Cook's air of mystery came from the fact that she was the only person who regularly left the house, gunning down the driveway on her boisterous red motorbike and returning with supplies in the sidecar. Today, she pulled out a large square package wrapped in brown paper. Shenanigan's mood lifted a little. If the reunion starts tomorrow, does that mean Mom and Dad are coming home? She asked hopefully. Cook avoided her eyes. I'm sure they'll say in their letter. Opening their parents' post was a ceremonial affair, as it only arrived every few months and was always stuffed with gifts. Shenanigan liked to look at the custom stamps first, the record of their journey their package had taken. She would close her eyes and imagine what those places sounded and smelled like. Two things you could never learn from the pictures in an atlas. Recently, most of the stamps lettering had been in Portuguese and Spanish, of which Shenanigan could read a little, and had inked pictures of mountains blurred by rain and seawater. She carefully smoothed the paper, reading the labels. Lima, Rio de Janeiro, Paris, London. Perhaps once she had Vial's hoard, she could follow the postmarks backwards to her parents. Cook pulled out and set aside a bottle of something dark for Maelstrom, a thick envelope for Schadenfreude, and a packet of seeds for herself. There was a gift for each of the girls, too. For Phenomena, a new journal bound in leather, of the kind Charles Darwin had used. For Shenanigan, a large knife, almost like a sword, that widened toward the tip. It was immediately confiscated by Cook. Felicity did not rush forward with her sisters. Instead, she took her letter and her sheaf of French fashion magazines bound up with a ribbon and quietly headed upstairs. Over the past few years, she had grown less enthusiastic about their parents' letters. They seemed to always make her sad. There was also a postcard addressed to each of them. Shenanigans read, First at the site, some wonderful glyphs, utterly spectacular logograms. Very clear and undamaged. Your father's been bitten by something and won't stop complaining. Enclosed is a machete to use on the nettles. Love, Mother and Father. I'm thirsty today. Oh, drop some water on me. Oh, P.S. Don't run with the machete. P.P.S. Sorry we can't make it to the reunion. Say hello to your cousins for us. And stay out of trouble. The postcard was of the staggered steps of a temple draped with greenery. Her parents were at the real temple reconstructing dead languages with their university. Shenanigan pretended that the postcard was a window and that if she looked hard enough she could see her mother knelt by one of the carvings, notebook in hand, or her father rummaging through a first aid kit. She hadn't seen either of them in over a year. The postcard would look wonderful on her wall with all the others. The feeling Shenanigan had at Aunt Schadenfreude's funeral rehearsal had found a little dark corner of her mind, the part that got plenty of rainfall. It had been growing and growing for a long time, fed by Aunt Inheritance's words, until she felt like the temple on the postcard, disappearing into the jungle. But Aunt Inheritance's lecture had given her an idea. From birth to death, she'd said. Shenanigan opened the map under the table just to double check. Then she kicked Philomena on the ankle. Lab, she mouthed at Philomena's indignant look. 1 hour. Aunt Schadenfreude had given Phenomena a room in the attic on the basis that bad smells like heat would rise and keep the chemical stench of her experiments away from the lower floors. Phenomena herself didn't mind. A mishap with chlorine gas when she was 4 had destroyed her sense of smell. No one ventured up there but Shenanigan, who was often summoned when Phenomena was working on a more dangerous experiment to do a similar job as a canary in a coal mine. What the canary does in a coal mine, they keep one down there so that if it dies from the fumes, the workers know we better get out since the canary died. Her sister uses her like that. That's crazy. As Aunt Inheritance clambered about, settling into the puce room below, Shenanigan climbed the ladder to her sister's lab. She liked Phenomena's room. It had sloping ceilings, slightly scorched with posters of the periodic table and serious-looking women in lab coats. A bed was tucked beneath the window, but Phenomena sat most of her time at a large, scarred bench surrounded by test tubes, vials, bottles, beakers, 3 Bunsen burners, and an old microscope that crouched in the corner like a great brass insect. She found Phenomena standing upright, safety goggles on, holding an empty test tube and snoring gently. Shenanigan gave her a solid poke in the thigh with the thermometer, and Phenomena opened her eyes and turned on the Bunsen burner as if she had never fallen asleep. "Oh, good, you're here." She thrust a beaker at Shenanigan. "How's this smell?" Shenanigan sniffed. "Sweet," she said decidedly. "A bit like a Bakewell tart." "Drat," sighed Phenomena. "I've made cyanide again." The poison went in a bottle with a glittery skull and crossbones sticker, and the bottle went into the cabinet with her other concoctions, hopefully labeled and tightly sealed. Cyanide is deadly. "You're in a mood," Phenomena observed, giving her sister a quick, piercing glance. "You're fidgeting. If you're not careful, you're going to knock something over." Shenanigan shrugged. "I probably will. You heard Aunt Inheritance. I can't help it. It's in my name." Phenomena snorted. "Is that what you're upset about? Inheritance talks rubbish. All that gruff about the dictionary." Phenomena brandished her thermometer like a wand. "Correlation does not equal causation, Shenanigan." "What does that mean?" "It means that just because 2 things seem connected, it doesn't mean they actually are." Very cool illustration there. Here comes Shenanigan through the spot in the floor. There's Phenomena. Shenanigan was not convinced. She fiddled idly with a glass test tube. What's the definition of phenomena?" "Oh, that's easy. I come across it all the time in research. It means an interesting event or behavior that makes you want to do experiments." "So you have a science name and you like science?" Shenanigan stuck her finger in the test tube and tapped it against the bench. "Maelstrom's name means a great big whirlpool, and he went to became a sea captain. And don't you think Aunt Inheritance was right, that the dictionary knows who we're going to be?" Phenomena's eyes glinted behind her glasses. "Of course not." She pulled a pencil from her hair and opened her new notebook. "But I do think it merits further research. It brings up all sorts of questions about nature versus nurture. It's perhaps more of a metaphysical matter when you get right down to it, but aspects of it can probably be measured. Phenomena started rambling about things that Shenanigan didn't understand. Shenanigan tried to surreptitiously pull her finger out of the test tube. It was stuck. She shook her hand frantically under the bench. Isn't there a way for us to check? Well, if you wait long enough, you'll grow up, and then we'll know for sure, said Phenomena. There was a small crash as the test tube slid off Shenanigan's finger and smashed on the floor. Oops. Or maybe we should solve this sooner than we should solve this sooner than later. Ooh, you could be a case study. Phenomena rummaged for her flask. In order to keep her brain in tip-top condition, Phenomena made herself a sort of smoothie to drink in the lab. It was the color of mud and contained, among other things, spinach, kale, cod liver oil, blueberries, certain kinds of algae, soy sauce, broccoli, and egg yolks. She called it her solution. Every time she took a swig, Shenanigan gagged. Phenomena insisted that it contained all the vitamins and protein she needed for a long day of mental exercise. Shenanigan insisted it smelled like a bin. Inheritance seems to think the dictionary itself decides our names, said Phenomena. So ideally, the first step would be to look up your exact definition. But the dictionary is behind glass and probably alarmed. Even if we do get to it, Aunt Inheritance might actually kill us. She could try, but I thought about this already, said Shenanigan. Look. She spread her map over the table. There was another place in which the Swiss definitions were written down, a place she had been dying to get into. She pointed at the bottom of her map to the bit helpfully labeled cellar. Chapter 5 is called Grave Matters. Look at those. Those are like skeleton keys, I think they're called. But they have letters that say grave matters. I mean, serious stuff. The girls waited until midnight to put their plan in motion, knowing that anything secret ought to be done when the clock strikes 12 and the house is safely asleep. There wasn't much risk of being heard regardless. The only person who slept within earshot of the cellar was Cook. And since she believed the house to be haunted with the same unswerving faith she had in garlic, aspirin, and the post office, she would certainly blame any noises on spirits. The challenge wasn't in staying secret. The cellar was kept locked, and there was only one key. The girls had only been inside Aunt Schadenfreude's study a few times, and only when they were in trouble. As soon as Shenanigan put a toe over the threshold, she shuddered, the echoes of previous telling-offs still ringing around the room. The mahogany paneling and red wallpaper made it look like a courthouse, dominated by the large desk from behind which Aunt Schadenfreude had handed down her sentence on many occasions. The study was only one of a few rooms Shenanigan hadn't mapped. Maelstrom had insisted that there was a secret exit on the grounds somewhere inside, and she itched to investigate the paneling, but she had to focus. Aunt Schadenfreude was asleep in the straight-backed red velvet armchair she used instead of a bed. Her iron collar shone dully in the light from the dying fire. So did the keys on her belt. Phenomena lingered in the doorway. A lifetime of pouring chemicals had given her the steadier hands, but Shenanigan was far more accomplished in matters of theft. Over the years, she had stolen every single one of Felicity's diaries and had recently grown tall enough to pickpocket Uncle Maelstrom. Shenanigan clicked her fingers next to her aunt's ear to check she was deeply asleep. When she didn't stir, Shenanigan took the keys in one hand. With the other, she tightly wrapped a strip of one of Felicity's ruined dresses around them to muffle their clinking. Aunt Schadenfreude shifted a little in her sleep, and her collar thunked against the side of the chair. Shenanigan wasn't sure why her aunt even wore the iron collar. Cook said she didn't need to. Medically speaking, it couldn't have been comfortable. Perhaps she was worried that if she removed it, her head would fall off. Willing her fingers not to tremble, Shenanigan began to unbuckle the ancient leather belt tied at Aunt Schadenfreude's waist. It was hot in the study. Hot. I've never heard that phrase. As Schadenfreude kept the great fireplace stacked high even in the summer. Sweating, Shenanigan silently slid the keys off the belt and, biting her tongue in concentration, rebuckled it. Not a twitch from Aunt Schadenfreude. As she was about to make her escape, Shenanigan spied a small, well-worn book on her aunt's reading table. Ignoring Phenomena's tiny groan of frustration, Shenanigan picked it up and opened it at the bookmarked page. It was a battered German to English dictionary. Underlined on the marked page was Schadenfreude, noun, the enjoyment felt at the misery of others. That seemed about right to Shenanigan. Come on, hissed Phenomena. Shenanigan placed the book back on the table and slipped out the room. I didn't really get that vibe from Schadenfreude, really, that she enjoys when others are unhappy. Well, that's an awful way to live. There is a second tradition in the Swift family that goes along with the naming. It's not as cheerful. A week or so after a child is born, a large, heavy package arrives at Swift House to be stored in the cellar until it is needed. Their names are quite literally set in stone. Staring down from the top step, Shenanigan decided the cellar must be where her family stored all their extra darkness. She and Phenomena looked out over the room that spanned the entire length of the house, an endless space where shadows lived and breathed and were swallowed by bigger, hungrier shadows. Their torch was a bare thread of light, twisting away into a labyrinth of steel racks, and on these were stacked gravestones like books on a shelf. Shenanigan shined her torch at the nearest stone. It read, "Ameliorate Swift," and then there was a blank space where the dates should be, and below that was the definition. Verb, to make something better. A sweep of the torch down the shelf revealed hundreds more. Until now, Shenanigan hadn't really understood how large her family was. The Swifts had scattered themselves across the world, and she had met so very few of them, while they were alive at least. She usually made their acquaintances once they weren't. "Well, we'll never find me in here," she said cheerfully. "Of course we will," said Phenomena. "Look, they're alphabetized. It's like a library." Shenanigan squinted. It was true. There were neat letters stamped into each of the shelves. It was exactly like a library, except you were only allowed to check out one book, and only once you had checked out yourself. Even with the letters, it was difficult for them to find their way. They took a right at D and ended up at M. They turned left at M and found themselves at H. They passed through PQR and ended up back at A. "Oh," called Phenomena. "Oh, what?" "No, just O. We passed it already." "Oh, can you see I?" Can you see me?" "You? You's back that way." "I thought it was you are." "You're both ridiculous," said a voice from the darkness. The girls whipped around. Felicity stood with her arms crossed, looking as bored as it was possible to be at midnight in a cellar full of gravestones. Let's stop there. It's a good place. We'll see what Felicity, maybe Felicity's curious too. I'm enjoying it. I hope you are. All right, kisses until we read again, my love. Mwah. Happy birthday, book.